Daddy will punish you. Daddy will punish you. Daddy will punish you.
These words would forever remain etched in Rita Hayworth's memory. They echoed in her mind throughout her life, a haunting reminder of a childhood devoid of play or joy. Her father saw in little Rita not just talent, but a tool to realize his ambitions. In his eyes, she wasn't a daughter, but a project meant to bring him success. How did a girl raised under the stern gaze of Daddy become one of Hollywood's greatest stars? And what ultimately happened to the woman whose life was filled with triumphs, but ended so tragically? On October 17, 1918, in the bustling and diverse borough of Brooklyn, a girl was born whose life would later become the epitome of both Hollywood dreams and tragedy. Born into a family of dancers, Margarita Carmen Cancino was surrounded from the start by the magic of the stage and the uncompromising discipline of the arts. Her father, Eduardo Cancino, a Spaniard and professional flamenco dancer, saw in his daughter the continuation of his passion. Her mother, Volga Hayworth, of Irish descent, brought an American perspective to art, making their union a unique blend of cultures. The Cancino family wasn't rich in money, but their wealth lay in their art. Eduardo Cancino, a respected dancer, had emigrated from sunny Spain in hopes of finding recognition in America. His passion for dance was not just a profession, it was his legacy, his life. From an early age, Eduardo saw in Rita not merely a daughter, but a ticket to fame. She could carry on his work, bolster the Cancino name, and perhaps reach the heights that had remained out of his own grasp. Yet such a dream came with endless rehearsals, strict discipline, and complete submission to his will. Childhood games? They didn't exist. Laughter with friends? That was a luxury she couldn't afford. "The stage is your home," he would tell her, not realizing that these words were replacing genuine parental love. Instead of warm embraces, there were corrections to her movements. Instead of praise for good grades, there was another dance lesson. Rita, still Margarita at the time, never complained. But what was it like for a child whose love was measured by the number of performances and accomplishments? Her talent shone brightly, but behind that brilliance lay a bitterness, something priceless she had lost before she even understood its value. Rita Hayworth's childhood resembled the schedule of an adult performer more than the carefree years of play and fun. From an early age, she was under the strict control of her father. Every morning began with grueling training sessions, where even the smallest mistake could provoke her father's anger. Rita was forced to grow up faster than her peers. Dolls were replaced by high heels, and instead of a schoolyard, she was surrounded by the stages of cabarets. She didn't attend school. Her education consisted solely of dance lessons and instructions on how to please an audience. "Do as I say, and success will be ours," Eduardo would repeat. The fear of disobeying him outweighed her exhaustion or any desire to stop. During family tours, which included performances in Tijuana, Rita was immersed in an adult world where cabaret dancing wasn't just an art form, but a means to make a living. She performed surrounded by noisy bars, bright lights, and people who saw her only as a source of entertainment. Eduardo believed that by doing this, he was protecting his daughter from the dangers of the outside world. Yet his care was distorted. Behind the facade of success lay an isolation that deprived Rita of the simple joys of childhood. This left a profound mark on her soul. Instead of growing up with self-confidence, Rita came to believe that her worth was measured only by her performances on stage. Rita's father forced her to perform provocative routines, utterly inappropriate for a child. She remembered the looks from the audience, some disapproving, while others were disturbingly attentive. To emphasize his daughter's maturity, Eduardo dyed her hair a deep black, stripping Rita not only of her natural appearance but also of her childhood innocence. It was as if he sought to turn her into a doll that embodied his ambitions, rather than allowing her to simply be a child. But the deepest scars came from the words she heard all too often.
Daddy will punish you.
These words preceded punishments that involved Eduardo wielding a belt. For Rita, they became the embodiment of fear and helplessness, emotions that would haunt her for years. She never dared to complain, hiding bruises and pain behind the mask of an obedient daughter and a diligent performer. Volga Cancino, Rita's mother, didn't notice at first, but eventually began to sense that something was wrong. She saw changes in her daughter's behavior and observed Eduardo becoming increasingly authoritarian and harsh. The full extent of the situation, however, only became clear when she accidentally witnessed a scene that forever changed her perception of her husband. After that, Mrs. Cancino started sleeping in the same bed as her daughter to protect her from Eduardo's punishments. These experiences ingrained in Rita a habit of submission, one that would later define her complicated relationships with men in the show business world. But soon, an event would occur that would change her life forever. In the 1930s, while performing with her father on small stages across California, Rita caught the eye of a talent scout from Hollywood studio who attended one of their shows. The scout was immediately drawn to the young girl whose movements exuded a unique grace and whose gaze carried a subtle, captivating charisma. Rita didn't just dance, she seemed to bring the space around her to life. To the scout, she wasn't just a dancer, but a potential movie star. Yet Rita found it hard to believe. From a young age, she'd been taught to live in her father's shadow, and the idea of being someone independent felt almost forbidden. Eduardo, however, had a different perspective. While he'd always dreamed of fame for himself, he recognized the financial opportunity this presented, and his ambitions outweighed any reservations. "This is your chance, Margarita. You have to try," he told her, though perhaps he wrestled with conflicting emotions inside. Soon after, Rita found herself at a casting call where industry professionals noticed her for the first time. This encounter became her ticket to Hollywood, a world that would bring her fame and make her a symbol of an era, but one that would also cause her much pain. At the time, she couldn't have known this moment would mark the beginning of her rise, the start of a journey whose cost she would only come to understand later. In 1935, at just 17 years old, Rita signed her first contract with Fox Film Corporation. For the young girl who was only just beginning to realize her ambitions, it was a moment of triumph. But Hollywood didn't welcome her as warmly as she'd hoped. Her Spanish surname, Cancino, and strikingly expressive features immediately typecast her as an exotic dancer. She was offered roles where she had to play the stereotypical Latina beauties, characters who were rarely given more than a few lines. Rita dreamed of serious roles and opportunities to prove her abilities, but reality was far less kind. She felt trapped in a box that didn't allow her to grow. In every film, she was seen only through the lens of her appearance. Even her dancing talent, which she'd once been so proud of, became in Hollywood just another bright but restrictive trait. "I'm more than this," Rita thought to herself, but her voice was too quiet to be heard at the time. Her contract with Fox taught her an important lesson. Hollywood demanded not only hard work, but also the willingness to play by its rules. Her first on-screen appearance, just a few brief minutes, marked the beginning of a long journey to prove she could be more than just a beautiful face. What followed next was a series of challenges that would shape her transformation into a true star. In 1935, Rita Hayworth landed one of her first roles in the film Dante's Inferno. Though it was a tiny role, barely noticed by audiences and critics, it held significant meaning for Rita herself. On set, she discovered a fascination not only with being on stage, but also with the art of transformation. For the first time, Rita began to consider that her future might involve more than just dancing. She started dreaming of serious acting. While working on the film didn't bring her fame, it ignited her a desire for something greater, to break free from stereotypes and become someone meaningful in the world of cinema. In Hollywood, every word, sound, and even a name had to align with audience expectations. Producers decided that Margarita Cancino sounded too ethnic, too foreign for mainstream appeal. They convinced her to change her name and begin a new chapter in her career, to become Rita Hayworth, adopting her mother's surname. For Rita, this was a painful decision. Changing her name symbolized not just a new image, but also rejection of her culture and roots, which had long been an integral part of her identity. It marked a symbolic break from her past, her Spanish heritage, the dances of her childhood, and the world that had shaped her. Each time she introduced herself with her new name, it was though she was convincing herself it was the right choice. Yet deep inside, she felt as though she was sacrificing a part of herself for fame. This was the compromise Hollywood demanded. Individuality mattered only if it conformed to pre-established standards. Thus, Rita Hayworth was born, a future Hollywood icon. But with this name came an internal struggle to preserve her true self in a world where everything, even identity, was a commodity. After a string of disappointments with Fox Film Corporation, Rita signed a contract with Columbia Pictures in 1937. Producer Harry Cohn saw in her what others had failed to recognize, the potential to become a true star. For Rita, this marked the beginning of a new chapter, but it came with radical changes that Hollywood deemed essential for success. To fit the mold of the perfect star, Rita underwent a complete transformation. Her natural dark hair was dyed a radiant copper red, a color that would later become her signature color. Harry Cohn also insisted on a surgical procedure to alter her hairline, perfecting her appearance to align with Hollywood's ideals. Each change was a painful adjustment for Rita. These transformations not only signified her entry into a new world, but also required her to relinquish her natural beauty and individuality. When she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw the girl she used to be, but rather the person others wanted her to become. Yet her efforts paid off. Columbia Pictures began to promote Rita aggressively as a rising star, and soon her name started to gain recognition. Despite the personal sacrifices, this was Rita's first true taste of success, a step closer to the fame she'd long sought. By the late 1930s, Rita Hayworth began landing roles that allowed her to step out of the shadows of the background and establish herself as a legitimate actress. One such breakthrough came with the film Only Angels Have Wings, 1939, where her on-screen presence captured the attention of critics and audiences alike.
Drink?
Are you Americans?
Well,
I thought you were a couple. Gee.
For Rita, this was a pivotal moment when her perseverance and hard work began to pay off. Her grace, charm, and authenticity shone through the glossy persona Hollywood had constructed for her. Each look from the audience conveyed that her efforts had not been in vain. "She's different, not like the others," critics wrote, recognizing how Rita was transforming into a star with each new role. Slowly but surely, she was climbing toward her dream, carving her path in a world where beauty often mattered more than talent. But what challenges did she face along the way? In Hollywood, Rita Hayworth had to face the harsh reality of an industry where beauty often overshadowed talent, and women were frequently seen more as ornaments to the frame than as true artists. Despite her abilities, Rita had to constantly prove that she deserved more than to simply be a glamorous figure on screen. She accepted any role, sometimes ones that were unremarkable or repetitive, to establish her name. Rita worked tirelessly, perfecting every movement, every line, every look. Yet her efforts often went unnoticed, her true essence as an actress obscured by the dazzling mask imposed on her by Hollywood. She felt like a bird in a gilded cage, surrounded by attention and compliments but cut off from her true nature, and her dream of being appreciated for her talent rather than her appearance. Her radiant smile on screen concealed an inner struggle. Every step she took was a compromise between her personal aspirations and the demands of the industry. Then an event occurred that would fundamentally change her life. By the early 1940s, Rita Hayworth had finally become one of Hollywood's most sought-after actresses. Her breakthrough came with the film Blood and Sand, 1941, where she demonstrated for the first time her capabilities as a serious dramatic actress. On screen, Rita wasn't just a seductive woman, but a complex, multi-layered character, whose emotions spoke louder than words. This film was her personal victory. For the first time, she managed to break through the stereotypes, proving she was capable of more than merely adorning a frame. Yet Hollywood was slow to fully acknowledge her achievements. The press, while praising her performance, often focused more on her dazzling beauty than her acting skill. Rita felt that she had to fight repeatedly to be recognized as an actress and not merely a glamorous star. It was a difficult path. The entertainment world remained unfair, placing labels on her and prioritizing looks over talent. But audiences saw something inspiring in her determination. She never complained, never sought shortcuts, and continued to work, proving that her success was a result of effort and not just beauty. Her eyes on screen sparkled with not only charm, but also inner strength, a quality the world came to love her for. Yet how did she secure her place in history? In 1946, Rita Hayworth made cinematic history with her iconic role in the film Gilda. Her character, femme fatale with a mysterious smile and magnetic allure, became the embodiment of seduction and strength. The scene where she performs Put the Blame on Mame remains one of the most iconic moments in film history, and Rita herself became a sex symbol for an entire generation. However, this success came at a cost. The image of Gilda was so powerful that it began to overshadow Rita as a person. To audiences and fans, she became synonymous with her character, the alluring woman who could enchant and destroy with a single glance. Yet the real Rita was nothing like Gilda. She was sensitive, dreamy, and deeply yearning for love and understanding. She later admitted with poignant honesty, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but they wake up with me." This now famous quote encapsulated her inner pain. Rita recognized that the persona crafted by Hollywood had created a barrier between her and the world. Her true self, her emotions, dreams, and vulnerabilities remained hidden behind the glossy facade of the femme fatale. Gilda brought her unparalleled fame, but also imposed a label she could never fully shed. The film was both her greatest triumph and a stark reminder of how easy Hollywood could transform a person into a myth, neglecting the human being beneath the image. As Rita Hayworth's career began to soar, her father, Eduardo Cancino, grew increasingly distant from her. For him, the changes in her appearance, the Hollywood-forged name, and her new life felt like a betrayal of family values, and a rejection of the traditions he had worked so hard to instill in her since childhood. Despite her success, Rita carried a deep sense of guilt. Eduardo had been her first mentor, the man who laid the foundation of her career. But he had also been her jailer, robbing her of her childhood and independence. Returning to his strict control was impossible, yet that did little to ease her emotional pain. Inside, she wrestled with conflicting emotions. She knew she had built her life on her own terms, yet she couldn't shake the guilt of her estrangement from the father who had once meant everything to her. This internal struggle marked one of the first significant emotional losses in her life. The rupture with Eduardo left Rita even more vulnerable. Her growing success brought no solace. Each new step in her career reminded her of a man who now viewed her not with pride, but with judgment. It was in this moment that she came to understand a painful truth. The road to fame often comes at the cost of personal sacrifices, leaving scars that may never fully heal. Rita Hayworth became one of the most famous women of her time. Her name was known worldwide, her beauty and talent inspiring millions. Yet behind the dazzling image lay a price she paid every day. Hollywood demanded perfection. The flawless image, the radiant smile, the sparkling eyes, these became her trademarks. But behind this facade was an exhausted woman whose personal life and health had long been pushed aside. Rita often stepped in front of the camera feeling a deep fatigue that seemed to seep into her very being. Yet her professionalism never allowed her to show weakness. Each time she faced the lenses, she put on her iconic smile, concealing the inner wounds that went unnoticed by the world. But in her personal life, she faced nothing but tragedy. Rita Hayworth's personal life resembled a dramatic screenplay, with each new act filled with pain and disappointment. Her first husband, Edward Judson, was the man who transformed her appearance and career, but not for her happiness. The relationship felt more like a business partnership than a marriage. He saw her as a project rather than a woman to love. Under his pressure, Rita underwent plastic surgery, changed her hair color, and abandoned her original name. This marriage marked the beginning of her loss of self-identity. Her second marriage to the brilliant director Orson Welles seemed like a fairy tale. Rita truly believed she'd found her love. But soon romance gave way to infidelity and mutual misunderstanding. Orson was consumed by his ambitions while Rita wrestled with her insecurities and fears. Their union couldn't withstand the strain and they parted ways. But it was her next marriage that would nearly break her. Rita Hayworth's marriage to Prince Alkan was not only a fairy tale romance, but also a source of intense scandal. From the outset, their relationship sparked controversy. A prince from a wealthy Muslim elite marrying a Hollywood star? Their union was seen as too bold for the era. The public criticized Rita, claiming she was unworthy of her titled husband, and their divorce in 1953 became a media sensation. After their separation, a bitter custody battle ensued over their daughter, Yasmin. The court proceedings became a public spectacle, with Rita's private struggles splashed across the front pages. She found herself fighting not only her ex-husband, also societal judgment, which often sided with the influential and wealthy prince. For Rita, it was more than a fight for her child. It was a fight for her dignity. Having fought her way to the top in Hollywood, she now had to prove herself as a mother. Every hearing, every newspaper article reminded her of the fragility of her personal happiness. This period revealed the immense challenges Rita faced beyond the film industry. She remained resilient, even when the world seemed to stand against her. Loneliness and pressure, constant companion in Rita Hayworth's life, were deeply rooted in her past. The origin of her inner demons lay in her childhood, dominated by the strict and controlling presence of her father, Eduardo Cancino. The phrase, "Daddy will punish you," which she had heard repeatedly as a child, left an indelible scar on her soul. It symbolized not only physical pain, but also the absolute control from which Rita longed to escape, only to find that it followed her into adulthood. Even as a child, appearing to the world as a successful and independent woman, she couldn't shake the lingering sense of submission. Hollywood became her new father, dictating how she should look, behave, and live. Her dependence on the expectations of others and the need to conform to their standards slowly eroded her from within. To numb the pain, she increasingly turned to alcohol. Alcohol became her refuge, a temporary escape from the memories that haunted her. Each glass of wine or cocktail transported her further from the little girl who'd once danced for her father's approval, hiding her fear behind a beautiful smile. But the harder she tried to flee, the more her past caught up with her. "Daddy will punish you" became an echo that haunted not only her childhood, but also her adult life, albeit in a different form. Hollywood replaced her father, and the relentless scrutiny of the press became like those endless rehearsals, where perfection was the only option. This vicious cycle left her with little chance of finding true freedom. Alcohol didn't bring her peace, but became her silent cry for help. It was as if she were trying to drown out the voices from her past, which constantly told her she wasn't good enough, that she had to earn love and recognition. Her struggle with these ghosts of her past revealed the depth of her pain, hidden beneath the dazzling exterior of a Hollywood icon. Among the many roles Rita Hayworth played in her life, the most challenging and heartbreaking was that of a mother. Her daughter Yasmin Aga Khan, born during her marriage to Prince Ali Khan, later recalled feeling a lack of maternal warmth during her childhood. Instead of closeness and care, Rita, consumed by her struggles with addiction and the decline of her career, grew increasingly distant from her family. Yasmin grew up watching her mother, adored by the world for her beauty and talent, sink further into the shadows of her inner conflicts. Rita's love for her daughter was undeniable, but the emotional wounds and fears stemming from her own troubled childhood prevented her from becoming the mother she aspired to be. Memories of the cold discipline she endured as a child and the loss of connection with her father may have deepened her anguish over her growing estrangement from Yasmin. For a young girl who saw her mother not only through the glamorous role she played on screen, but also in her most vulnerable moments, this emotional distance left a lasting impression. Yasmin later spoke about it with a mixture of sadness and understanding, recognizing that Rita was grappling with her own demons, which kept her from expressing her love as fully as she wanted. The loss of connection with her family amplified the tragedy of Rita's life. She was acutely aware that she was falling short of her expectations as a mother, and this only deepened her internal crisis. For a woman who dazzled audiences as independent and strong heroines on screen, her real life was filled with insurmountable barriers that kept her from being closer to those she truly loved. By the 1950s, the brilliance of Rita Hayworth's stardom began to fade. Hollywood, which had once elevated her to the highest pedestal, was now turning away. Film offers grew less compelling and further removed from the roles that had once showcased her talent. At the same time, her mounting struggles with alcoholism, divorces, and relentless legal battles began to take a toll on her life. By the 1960s, Rita Hayworth's life took a bitter turn. Once one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood, her name had been synonymous with wealth, success, and limitless opportunity. Yet years of court battles, legal fees, poor financial investments, and the lack of consistent work eroded her financial stability. The once dazzling icon, whose image had graced countless magazine covers, was now a woman who often had to rely on the support of her family and children. Those who had once admired her meteoric success could hardly imagine that the star of her magnitude would find herself in a fight for survival. This stark contrast between the luxury of her past and the financial hardships of her present underscored the depth of Rita's tragedy. Her glorious past only heightened the sense of injustice surrounding her decline. Audiences not only witnessed her fall, but also saw the pride that kept her fighting in the very end. However, this wasn't the extent of her misfortunes. By the late 1960s, Rita Hayworth began showing early signs of Alzheimer's disease. She would forget words, lose her way in a familiar place, and struggle to recall significant events. These changes increasingly complicated her personal life and made continuing her career in film impossible. At the time, Alzheimer's disease was virtually unknown, and those around her attributed her behavior to years of alcoholism, or dismissed it as the antics of a fading star. Her forgetfulness and unusual actions often became the subject of mockery or criticism, deepening her sense of isolation. Even as her star began to dim, Rita Hayworth refused to give up. In the 1970s, she made several attempts to return to the screen, appearing in a handful of films. Each project was a battle, against her own fears, against public criticism, and against the shadows of her difficult past that seemed ever present. She poured her heart into every new role, giving everything she had left. But Hollywood had changed, and Rita remained a symbol of a bygone era, when her triumph shone brightest. Despite her dedication, these new efforts couldn't eclipse the success of her earlier work. The financial and emotional support she so desperately needed never materialized. The harsh reality of her struggles begged the question, what ultimately became of this once glittering star? Once surrounded by millions of fans, Rita Hayworth spent her final active years in near total isolation. Her illness, complicated temperament, and unresolved conflicts from the past gradually pushed away friends and former colleagues. By the early 1980s, almost no one from her once vibrant social circle remained. Her life became quiet and solitary, far removed from the fame and glamour of Hollywood. The only person who stayed by her side was her daughter, Yasmin. Despite their strained relationship during Yasmin's childhood, she assumed full responsibility for her mother's care. Yasmin put aside her own career and personal life to remain close, offering Rita the warmth and love that had been lacking in their earlier years. This chapter of their relationship was both touching and heartbreaking. For those who had once known Rita as a radiant Hollywood star, the contrast was stark. The woman who had dazzled audiences on screen now lived in silence, entirely dependent on her daughter's care. By the early 1980s, Rita had completely vanished from public life. Her condition deteriorated further as Alzheimer's disease robbed her not only of her memory, but also of her connection to the outside world. Yasmin became her anchor, steadfastly protecting her mother despite the immense challenges they faced. On May 14, 1987, Rita Hayworth, once one of Hollywood's brightest stars, passed away in New York City. The cause of her death was complications from Alzheimer's disease, which had been steadily eroding her life for many years. Her passing was quiet, surrounded only by her closest loved ones, for whom she was not an icon, but a mother, a relative, a woman. By the time of her death, Rita no longer recognized her family. She lived in a world where the memories of her illustrious career, achievements, and triumphs had been wiped away by her illness. The years of fame and adoration from millions had faded into a void, leaving her without even the awareness of who she had once been. This ending rendered her story profoundly tragic. Rita Hayworth, a symbol of glamour, beauty, and success, left the world having lost not only her status, but also her memory, the essence of what makes us human. Her death served as a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the fleeting nature of fame, which can vanish, leaving only the recollections of others behind. For her fans and those who knew her story, this ending was a painful lesson. Rita, who had shown on screen as the embodiment of a dream, ultimately became a symbol of human vulnerability, reminding us that even the brightest stars can fade into the shadows, forgotten even by themselves.